Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. Thank you for engaging these great conversations we get to have on this show. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my co-host Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man? You survived the solar eclipse, and we're getting ready to have another great conversation. Does it get any better? That's the
It
question.
really doesn't. It doesn't, Phil. I was kind of a naysayer on the whole eclipse thing and whatnot. It was cool. It was definitely unique and different. I kind of enjoyed the couple of minutes of darkness during the middle of the day was unique, but we lived to see another day. So on to the next thing. But for sure excited about our guest today, as you kind of alluded to there. But yeah, things are good here in the Waco land.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get right to it. We do have
Good.
another great guest here, Lang Wedemeyer. He is the head coach at Liberty University. If you listen to the Brock Thompson episode, he also was there at South Dakota State, and Brock talked about Lang quite a bit there as well. So, Lang, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, awesome. It's so good. I know we've been able to do a lot of cool things with the United Soccer Coaches, the faith-based committee together. Been very grateful to get to know you and get to call you friend, and hopefully you feel the same way on the other side of there. But we always love to just hear your story, hear people's stories, and just start with that and kind of how you developed your passion for soccer coaching, leadership, and how you did end up at Liberty coaching there.
Sure. Well, I guess my age will tell you that it's a long story, but it's a good story. I can still remember the first kick of a soccer ball that I ever had. I was too young to play on the local rec team at 5 years old, give or take. But the coach of one of the teams was a friend of my parents, and he said, "Well, you can come be the ball boy." But he let me practice with him, and I can remember being in a line. Everything they tell you not to do these days. Of course, there was a long line of kids, and he put the ball down, he ran up and kicked it towards the goal, and then you go back to the back of the line. But I can still remember that today. But yeah, I mean, from that first kick, I just fell in love with the game and started playing. And played at Virginia Tech for a couple years. Played at Old Dominion University for a couple years. Was an assistant with the men's team there. Tried to stay in college soccer, couldn't find anything really full time. Went back to Roanoke, Virginia, where I grew up and was director of coaching of the Roanoke Star, the club that I had grown up in. I did that for about 3 years, was kind of sending out resumes, knew I really wanted to be in college soccer, was having a hard time finding anything. Then I got a call from South Dakota State, kind of out of the blue. I'd forgotten I even sent them a resume. And they said, we're going to start a brand new program. This was in January of 2000. And so I said, well, I've never been to that part of the world. I'll check it out. And so I went out that way and really kind of fell in love with the people and the opportunity to start a brand new program from scratch. So I was hired in end of January, early February of 2000. Had to put together a brand new team by August. So that was interesting. We had a club team and a few late recruits, and kind of away we went. And yeah, we started as Division 2, moved to Division 1 in 2004. Went through a transition period, which was really hard but taught me a lot during that time for sure. And really enjoyed the time there. My wife is also from Virginia. She had been out there. All our kids were born out there, but we knew we wanted to get back to Virginia at some point. Again, another long story made short. I had some friends in the Lynchburg area that was always telling me about all the great things happening at Liberty. And we just started saying, we started realizing like the idea to be in a Christian environment, the support that they had for their athletics, being close to our family in Virginia. There was just so many boxes that it checked, and we started praying about it, and God opened a door for us, and we stepped through it. That was
I love
7 years.
that. I love that, and Paul and I talk about this a lot, just about the journeys. They're all so different.
Mm,
But I think one of the kinda common threads we see in the college coaching world is people typically go to places that they're not expecting to go to. And you gotta be willing to do things that, as you said, are really hard, are uncomfortable, are not kinda in the norm, right? Both you and, your wife not from South Dakota, right? South Dakota is kind of this random place for a lot of people, right? I mean, a lot of people, if you're not going to see Mount Rushmore, there's not a lot of people going, "Hey, I'm going to South Dakota on my vacation this year," right? Now, Black Hills are amazing, but outside of that, you don't hear a lot about it, right? And so Anyway, so how has that been as far as that? You talked about those hard what were some of that like, you said it was really hard for that transition to Division One. Just love to hear that, just really what was hard about that, and what did you learn kinda that you were able to take into the rest of your coaching?
Sure. So I think that again, there was a ton of excitement as a young coach coming in, starting a brand new program. I learned a lot on the job, as they would say, and trying to create this and recruit. And the biggest mistake that I made in the early days was I was recruiting for talent, but not character. And I was just trying to find the best players I could, and I was overlooking some character flaws and stuff. I would see a kid that was really good on the field, but she was talking back to the referee, and I would just ignore it because I wanted a good player, and that really came back to kind of bite me in the long run, and so that was a valuable lesson early on, and so I'd really kind of over the first 3.5, 4 years had started to develop a program that was pretty close to breaking into the top 25 in the Division Two, and then we moved to Division One. And
Mm,
I can remember the first meeting I had with the team to tell them that we were gonna be moving from Division Two to Division One, and most people you would think would be really excited about that. I had a girl speak up in the meeting, said, "I didn't wanna go to Division One school, I wanna be a Division Two school," and I'm like, "Oh my
mhm,
gosh, what am I got myself into here?" So it was a change in the mindset. I had to recruit different people. I had to recruit different athletes. I had to recruit people who wanted to really be challenged at a different level. And so through that transition, again, it was almost like starting over. And we had to learn how to compete at a different level. We weren't in a conference for the first 4 to 5 years. And so we had to travel all over the country to find games, especially in
right,
October when everybody was in conference play. And so just the team dynamics and stuff. And then we finally had a really good recruiting class. I won't go into a ton of detail about this, but it's a pivotal part of my story. And we have finally had a really good recruiting class in 2005, and these were legitimate Division One players, and they came in, and as freshmen, there were like I think I had 9 recruits in that class. 8 of them were starting as freshmen,
mm,
and they hated each other. The team dynamics and the culture were awful.
wow,
There was talent, but they just couldn't stand one another. And so that whole after that first freshman fall, that whole spring, I felt like we had classroom sessions, as we called it, pretty much every day or every other day of just team bonding, getting to know each other on a deeper level, vulnerability sessions. Most of the stuff didn't even have to do with soccer. It was just trying to get to know each other on a more personal level so we could understand one another and appreciate our uniqueness. The great thing about that story, Phil, is that that team, all of those players came in during that transition, and at that time, it was a 5-year waiting period for the NCAA to allow you to play in
mm,
postseason play. So even if you so for instance, their junior year in 2007, we were in a conference, qualified for a conference tournament, but we're not allowed to play because we couldn't take the automatic bid.
right,
So we couldn't
right,
even play in that tournament. So in 2008, their senior year, they had 1 shot. None of those players left or transferred. They stayed in the program knowing they had 1
mm,
shot at postseason play, and their senior year, they came together, they won the regular season conference, we're in the Summit League, they won the conference tournament and beat number 12th ranked Colorado in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and,
wow,
and so it was such a great story, and I learned so much from those players, and even today, I'm telling my current players now Kelly Larson stories and Jess Heine stories and Alex Schaller stories about those times and how that team transformed itself.
yeah, and it's interesting in today's day and age with the portal, I don't know that we're gonna have stories like that anymore, you know? It seems like if it's hard at all, they're gone.
Mhm.
Do you agree with that? I mean, have you seen that same thing?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's kind of unfortunately a thing of the past at some level?
It is, and of course, there are always some very good reasons why players should transfer from
Sure.
one program to another, but the vast majority, it's entitlement. I'm not getting what I want right now, and I want it right now. So somebody else is going to value me more, and I'm going to I'm going to go and play at this other place, and I'm going to start and be the superstar that I'm not here because I'm not valued and respected and appreciated. as opposed to just kind of persevering through those difficult times and learning and growing through that, and then reaping those rewards from the character development.
Yeah. No, for sure, and there's so much. I mean, we could have a whole series on that topic alone, and I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
get back into that a little bit throughout this conversation, but I know that's something that a lot of coaches, a lot of people, and not just coaches, I mean, a lot of people in business are dealing with that as well right now, and so just, I love hearing the stories, and I think we need to tell more of the stories of when people stick through it and say, "Man, these lessons you're learning," but also the teams that are created at the other side of that crucible are so much stronger than the teams that just everyone bails because you're not building and bonding. It's that kind of forming, storming, norming, performing. You don't get past the storming part. People are like, I'm out,
right.
and so that's something that we never perform at our highest because we're never going through the healthy conflict and coming out the other side.
Mm,
So yeah, that's something that I love. I mean, that's just kind of team building, leadership, organizational health 101, right? But unfortunately, and I think that's why us who get that and have seen it, it's so frustrating because we're like, "Oh, come on, people, get that. Just push through. That's where you're gonna learn. That's where you're gonna become a stronger human as well." So, with that, I love hearing, the, personal why of everyone as well. So, can you just share what is your personal why, kinda your life purpose and how you're living it out? What does that look like?
sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And I remember kind of going through that. I've probably been coaching at South Dakota State for 6, 7, 8 years, and really that whole process there challenged me to say, Why am I coaching? What is my purpose? What do I want to get out of it?" And I can remember I was doing actually a coaching education course in Nebraska, and I got there a day early and just locked myself in the hotel room and just brainstormed and thought through it and prayed through it. And really what kind of came out of it was that my essential purpose is to help each and every player that I work with be the best version of him or herself that he can be. Obviously, I work mostly with women at the collegiate level, but I coach, a boys club team right now as well. My son plays on. So that certainly transfers over to them as well. So in that, I am at my best when I'm purpose driven. When I start to deviate from that purpose is when things get chaotic and confusing. And so that's always a good reminder for me to try to stay on that.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I'm similar to I think both Paul and I, it's just as far as that concept of helping others flourish, making good things better to be able to pour into them and see how we can make them into the best they can be. I mean, that's what hopefully coaches are doing, right? I think that's when we see the best coaches. That's really all they're doing. And then it transforms into wins and it transforms into great programs and it transforms into national championships and all the other thing, but it starts with, "Hey, how can I make this one player the best they can be and the best teammate they can be," right? What does that look like? Alright, on that note, I know, I mean, even as you're hearing you say that, you know that just mentorship is a part of what you do and who you are. And we've been fortunate enough I've been fortunate enough to work with you, but also we've been able to fortunate to do these iron chats with the United Soccer coaches and create this mentorship program, which is, kinda fits and starts at this point trying to get it just getting people because everyone is so busy, but can you talk about those and, kind of what your hope is about Iron Chats, about the mentorship program, and how you hope it will impact coaches and really just the landscape of US soccer and just the college soccer around the country?
Well, it's a great question, and I need to tell you first how important I think mentorship is, and how often it's underutilized within probably so many different areas of our lives, soccer being, the most specific and frontal for us. But where it really hit me the most was working and doing courses, instructing national, advanced national, and premier courses for what used to be the NSCA, now United Soccer Coaches. And the people that I got to meet through that organization, certainly there were a bunch of other people along the way of different coaches and teachers that poured into me in certain ways that I either recognized or was too young to recognize at the time. But I'll give you one story that is so profound and impactful for me that I think about all the time when I want to try to emulate this, and it revolves around Tony DeCicco, who many people listening to this will know of, and he passed away a number of years ago. But Tony, if you don't remember, he was a assistant with the '91 World Championship team with the women, and then he was the head coach in '99 when they won. And Brandi Chastain, took her jersey off after scoring the winning penalty kick against China. And so he was a big part of this coaching instructor staff group with the NSCA a number of years ago. And I was working a course down in Florida. He was instructing the goalkeeping course of it, or the goalkeeping portion. And it just happened that our lunches coincided. And so every day at lunch, I would grab my tray, my pad and pen, and go sit down next to him for 5 days straight and just pick his brain about anything and everything: team culture, formations, dynamics, individual defending, you name it. I was asking questions, and he would patiently sit there and answer and tell me stories and relay information just for 5 days in a row for about an hour and 50 minutes every day. And I just remember thinking, here's this young coach. I can give him absolutely nothing. There's nothing that I can truly offer him for the time that he's pouring into me. But even beyond that, after that week, I could email him, I could call him, I could say, "Hey, Tony, I need a finishing activity. Give me a good, tell me." He will respond within a day. And again, just to emphasize this story a little bit longer, a little bit more, when I had him listed as a reference, of course, but when I made the jump from South Dakota State to Liberty, I emailed him. This was in January of 2017, and I emailed him to say, "Hey, here's my new email. I'm moving jobs. I want to thank you so much. I hope we can stay in touch." And again, he responded within 24 hours and just say, "Congratulations, that's great. I'm proud of you," whatever. The amazing thing here, what people don't know, he was in the hospital undergoing cancer treatment. I mean, he eventually died from the cancer a few months later, but he took the time. He didn't mention anything about that to me in the email, but he took
Mm.
the time to respond to me in a moment where, essentially he was dying. And that story was so powerful for me and so impactful that I'm like, if he can have that type of impact on me, and of course, many, many other people, and spend that time, why can't I? And so that really lent itself to me having a passion for coaching education, for mentorship, for realizing that he's just one of many that have poured into me. And so I want to try to give at least a little of that back whenever and wherever I can. And so these iron chats, the mentorship program that we've done through the faith-based coaches, these are just these are avenues that I think have been great. I wish more people would take advantage of them because that learning and education process is so powerful.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I imagine as you now are having the ability to mentor more, you're seeing the impact of the mentee has on the mentor as well. So no doubt when you're having these conversations with Tony, you're impacting him like the mentees have impacted you. I mean, you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I tell you, it's you would reference Brock Thompson, and Brock came on and worked with me. He came in that season that we referenced in 2008, and that was really a transformational year for our team at South Dakota State, and gave us it's kind of like breaking the 5 minute mile or the 4 minute, that all of a sudden when it was done, like that, now that the program had belief. And so, Brock came in at that time, was my assistant for 8 or 9 years. And then when I was moving into Liberty, and the athletic director said, what should we do? Who should we hire? Who are good candidates? I said, the only person I trust to turn this program over to is Brock Thompson. It had been my baby for 17 years, but and Brock has done a phenomenal job. Again, I learned as much from him as he did from me, but just seeing him go and thrive now has been fantastic, and that's what you hope for the people that you work with, or that work under you, or that you have a chance to pour into and you want to see them thrive.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I heard a quote yesterday. It said someone said that the secret to success is successors.
Mm.
And I was like, I like that. I've never heard that. How have I never heard that before? But I think that's one of one of the things is the successors because that keeps the success going. It keeps the legacy going, right? Like that is something that is huge. So, all right. So what are speaking of that, like passing stuff on, what is one or two things? And it could go back before South Dakota State even, but kind of the beginning of your coaching career, what are some couple things you wish you would have known then that you know now that you'd like to pass on to some coaches who are out there just getting started and feeling like, "Man, is this ever gonna work for me?"
Well, I can remember we had a when I was at South Dakota State, I'd been there a year or two at the time, and I was watching a women's basketball team play in the Division II national tournament, and they were they have been and continue to be very good team at the Division I level as well. And I had this epiphany a little bit like, you don't know what you're doing. You know, you you don't understand how to coach women right now. And I can remember at the halftime of that basketball game, going back into my office, I wasn't an avid reader. I had a handful of books. But I did have a couple of Ants Endurance's books, and I'd worked with him in some Carolina camps in the past. And I pulled out one of his books and I went to the end and I looked at all the books that he had referenced there. And everything from, Men Are from Mars and Women Are for Venus or whatever that, any of those high altitude leadership. I basically just took that and I almost ripped the page out. And the next day I went to the library and I checked out about 10 books that talked about, leadership, coaching women, specifically understanding women, because I wasn't doing a very good job. I was a good coach, when a great coach. I was a good coach. I played at a decent level, had a relatively good understanding of the game. I knew what I kind of wanted, but I didn't understand relationships. And I had to kind of start to learn that and grow through that. I still mess up, but I'm a little bit better now after a few years and a lot of books that I've read. And so I would say that would be one of the things. And then in very close to that, the inside out coaching and just understanding what it meant to be a transformational coach versus a transactional coach. And it's so easy for us to fall back across that line even now because we've talked a lot about it on some of the iron chats, but our identities are so tied to our win-loss record, our championships and everything else, that it's very easy to fall back into, I just want to win today. How do we win? Versus how do I develop this person? How do I build a relationship? What's the bigger picture here? So those were a couple things that I was thinking about.
And I value that a lot, and I think that's definitely a I don't know if struggle is the word or not, but when we talk about coaching at a high level or any level, you retain your job by winning, so that very easily can slip back into the front and be the lens through which you look through. But recognizing that transformational view really does lead to the winning if done right and done appropriately. And it's a really hard thing to stay in front of. But so I value what you're saying there. Just the admission of like, hey, we've got to continue to work on being transformational because it's not always the easiest thing when it is a results based job, right? Kind of going along with that, and I think this transitions well into this, Lenny. I think at least I'd like to talk a little bit about how you know the role of your faith plays into your coaching style, and even the differences that you saw over the years of being at a South Dakota State versus now at Liberty, which is a Christian university, and just kind of take us through that. And I want to touch on, you talked a lot about relationships with players, but I think those relationships with your coaches as well, and how your faith played through maybe all those different avenues through your coaching career.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm not sure. Do we have 3 or 4 hours for this for this talk? Because it's a long story with a lot of twists and turns and places where I didn't expect Christ to show up, and he did, and deviated my direction. But I would say I would say that my journey has been just as I alluded to. It's been a stepping stone, and sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back, and there's a door that I went through that I didn't anticipate being there, and so many different facets of how my faith has grown. And I probably, to be honest with you, again, I was so excited about the opportunity to come to Liberty because it was a Christian environment, but the reality is my faith has grown tremendously here. I feel like I've grown as much or more than probably the people around me just because I've been challenged to really understand that faith and to know, why do I believe in this way? But to take a step back, and when I was at South Dakota State, certainly there were elements of character and moral and spiritual development that we wanted to implant within the team. And so when I really started to understand goal setting, we would have meetings 2 or 3 times a year with the players about their goals. And, we would talk obviously about soccer and academics and health and fitness, but we'd also talk about family, player relationships, and their spiritual goals. And again, the vast majority of the girls, not intentionally, but they almost all had some type of faith background, some more than others. But I don't remember anybody coming and saying, I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic. I mean, they may not have been much practicing, but there was some faith there. Well, that worked really well until somebody complained. And so then it was, okay, you can't put this as spiritual development. You have to say it's moral development or character development. Okay. So that was fine. And then, we wanted to do a Bible study, and that was fine until somebody complained. And then it was okay. Well, the girls can do that, but you can't be a part of it. All right. And so, so it was every time that, and I understand that from an administrative standpoint, I don't hold any grudges against them, that they were doing what they felt was by the rules and regulations, of being at a public university. But there was always, if 95% of the team wanted something, if there were one or two people that didn't, it never happened from that standpoint. When I get to Liberty, it was like mind blowing because it's all around you. And, we have pregame chapels and we pray with the other team and we have convocations twice a week. And, there's shepherds and there's campus community on Wednesday nights, and it's all around you. And it was almost kind of, I went from this desert and then I was dumped in the ocean, and it was having to navigate a little of this because it was overwhelming. How do I navigate this as a coach? How do I navigate this for my players? How do I come along beside them and not predict or add too much where they become numb to the message? And that's what we started to find out, is that they were bombarded with this so much that it was difficult for them to really take hold of the values that were being preached to them in such a way that was life changing. And so anyway, the long and the short of it is that I've grown so much in my faith. Certainly, I have a long ways to go, but just being challenged in a good way to understand what I believe, why I believe it, and how to practice that each day has been great. And because my players see me in doing that, and going to church and having a spiritual mentor, and being vulnerable with about where, with the mistakes that I've made in my faith journey, it's allowed them to also be vulnerable with that and grow so much more.
I like that a lot. And going back to your days at South Dakota State, when you kind of had to, you realize you kind of had to watch wording and things, and you couldn't lead a Bible study. Kind of. I mean, maybe this happened, maybe it didn't, but I'm sure that it did. The culture itself probably started to lead that with not without you. Obviously, you had support of it, and I'm sure you had ways to encourage and probably disciple some of your players or try to lead some of those things. But you know, how do if the culture is kind of leading that at South Dakota State within itself, somewhat separate from you, and then you step to a Liberty where you really can drive that. Have you had years where you really were allowed or were able to allow the culture itself, even at Liberty, to kind of guide that and lead that itself?
Absolutely. As you know, having worked in the college ranks, there's when you have uh, a culture within your program, And the way that I kind of like to describe it is that there's an overarching culture there that you try to establish and grow, whether that's a mission, a vision, a core value statements, whatever that looks like. But as players come and go, right? As groups of seniors graduate, as new players come in, as players grow and develop into new leaders within the program, there's certain elements of that culture that kind of shifts a little bit. You don't want it to shift too much because the overarching one needs to stay steady from year to year because that's the type of program you're trying to incorporate. So the faith piece within our program shifts and moves a little bit based on the personnel that's here. If you've got seniors and leaders that are very spiritual and very faith based, there's a different vibe, so to speak, within the team. If those leaders are a little bit not on that track, there's a different vibe within the team a little bit. And so it's interesting and how all of that works. And that's something that probably right now I'm navigating more than I have in the last few years because we just graduated about 8 players who were very strong personalities, very spiritual, and great leaders. And now we're kind of going, as Phil, you alluded to, that storming phase, like you're going through it again in this spring season as people try to figure out, where do I fit? How am I going to be a leader? What's my role on the team? What's my role on the field? And where does the spiritual lead us? And do we need to change something? So it's been really interesting this spring season to navigate that and kind of go through it, but trying to keep them on the path of their overarching saying, we can't deviate from this. Like this leads to all the success that we want to have, but you guys have the freedom because of your personalities to manage a little of that culture underneath it. So, but we don't want it to be too shaky or the top will fall. So that's been pretty interesting to navigate in that way.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks of navigating that, during my time at Baylor, and people would ask me, well, how do you kind of navigate the Bible studies and all the different things, and to me, it always came back to kind of what you're saying. What is the overarching culture of the current team? It changed from maybe not year to year, but every couple of years, not the priority. They're always, like you said, the overarching. There's some non-negotiables, right? Some things that we're not gonna steer away from. We're always gonna be part of this. But each culture that kind of goes through your team, so to speak, the culture within the culture navigates that differently. And I think as a coach, I think it's wise. I think we kind of learned this the hard way. I think it's wise to open your hands to that. Say, hey, if we can agree to the non-negotiables, everything inside of that is up for grabs. However you think we can best communicate this to the current team, let's do that. But you're in that phase right now and I've had that too, where you've had these strong leaders who really drove the culture and everybody was on board and went really well. And then they kind of leave and the rest are left for like, okay, who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Like, oh, she did this so well. Who's going to do that? And now identifying each of them, say, hey, you're all capable of it. And it doesn't have to look exactly like it is. Let's remember the non-negotiables, but how do you lead this next generation that's coming up to live within the non-negotiables, but still steer this team to the success of values that we want to have as a team, and how do we want it to look on the other side? It's great to hear that you're navigating it similarly, because I think there's some coaches who can. I think we did this early on as young coaches. Was this is how it should be done. This is how it should look. We're a Christian university, and this is how I view it. So this is how it's going to be done, and that might work for a year. And then the next group that comes through is kind of like, yeah, coach, I don't see it kind of happening that way. We don't communicate that way. And I think as I got older as a coach, it probably became more of that. Like, hey, coach, we don't communicate like that, and it's like, okay, the old guy will get out of the way. You guys take care of this and, let me know what you need. How has even like your time as a coach through the years, through generational change, so to speak, how have you navigated that as a coach to be able to help the youngest cultures kind of grow and I didn't even say survive, but survive kind of the culture battles that are going on?
I'm still learning.
Great answer. We always are, right?
I am not a Luddite, but I am also not great technologically. And so, I've kind of been holding out. I don't have an Instagram account. I don't have Twitter. I've got Facebook only to make sure I can wish people happy birthday. But I also have young assistants. And so I make sure they are the ones that can handle all of that, social media posts and all the other stuff that we need to do. And so anyway, but yeah, it's a great question. And I think that ultimately you guys have been in this business of coaching soccer a long time. There I there is there are definitely differences in players now than even when I first began coaching, and certainly from when I was playing. But there are also some things that have never changed and never will change. And I think for me, that's what, as much as I will complain about the transfer portal and entitlement and some of these things that kind of rock our culture, the reality is players want to be loved, they want to be cared for, they want to feel important, they want to feel valued. And if and how you do that, obviously that's part of the art of coaching, with each individual and with your team collectively. But that's never changed. And so I think that when I start to get a little flustered about society, the world culture, and everything else. Because we're at Liberty, but these girls are still 18 to 22-year-old girls. I mean, they still have egos and pride and pressure, and they still deal with the same thing that everybody else deals with. We're just fortunate that we can truly holistically develop them and talk about the faith piece because that's where it's all grounded. And we don't have to pretend it's something else. We can talk truth to them, but they still have struggles. They still have issues. And so that's where we can come along beside them and try to help them navigate those struggles in a more profound way. But ultimately, at the end of the day, those are the things that everybody always wants.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. To the core of who we are as human beings, even maybe more now than even when we were younger, they're craving that because they're maybe not getting that as much. And it is such a great thing that you pointed out. And I think another thing that pointed out at the beginning of that I don't want people to overlook is, you talked about your staff being younger assistants. We talk a lot on this show about building your staff and building your team as it comes to leadership. You're not just leading the young people on your team, but you're also leading a staff of people that, you're hopefully building a team where they have strengths that are maybe some of your weaknesses, and the technology might be one for some of us older coaches, right? That just do birthdays on Facebook. But I think building that team is the key point. I didn't want to skip over that. It was just a little point that you made, but I think it's such a big thing to kind of look at and say, hey, don't forget as you're building your team, how that can kind of look and maybe how it should look. So I wanted to point that out as well. Phil, anything to add to that discussion before we kind of move on there?
I think that was great stuff. That was great. I mean,
Yeah.
we could talk like most things, we could talk about that for hours and hours and hours, but I think you hit it well. No, I think there's so many things that are going into all that. And yeah, we could, like I said, we could talk more, but let's get to the next.
We'll add Lang to the very long list of guests who
Yes,
need to come back again. All right.
that's right.
So
That's
uh,
exactly right.
we'll add him to that
Only if
list.
Phil gets a Liberty shirt, probably.
Well, I mean, I
Has to
wasn't
do
going to
that one
say it, but
first.
since you brought it up,
Yeah, this is the teaser, and the shirt to Phil will get you
Just
back.
text me your address there, Phil. I'll get one of the mail to you here.
Uh, Lane, let's shoot back a little bit. I don't know why the thumbs up just came on our video there. That happens to be sometimes. Maybe it's laughter. Maybe it's me
you
talking
love
with my
what you
hands.
say. You just
Yeah,
love what you
I'm
say.
the most egotistical person in the podcast world. I've created my own thumb emojis to come up on the podcast. Let's go to some blasts from the past. Let's talk about your career a little bit as a player. Let's go back there. What are some one, maybe two? I don't know if you have multiple, maybe some defining moments as a player that have been impactful to you through your coaching career, and maybe things you kind of think back to at times as you interact with your current teams.
Well, as I said, I started like most of us, playing at 5, 6 years old, and started playing club, and ODP was a big deal when I was younger. Through those times, again, probably one of the most impactful things for me. And back when I was growing up, ODP was it because the club soccer was very regional. You didn't really travel much out of your state, and then maybe there was a trip somewhere, here or there every now and then. But the best kids were playing on their state teams, and Virginia was very, very talented in soccer. And so it was hard. So the first 2 years I tried out for ODP, I didn't even make it, but I kept coming back. And I can remember my dad saying, you know, "Why it's a waste of time." And I kept, I'm gonna keep coming back. And eventually I did make it and, you know, went on to play in college, and I played about 7 years of pro soccer. This is kind of pre-MLS slash right at the beginning of MLS in the '90s. And, so there were a lot of profound moments like through those times. One of the big things, kind of to your question there, was I had 4 surgeries in a year in college. So I was playing on a summer league team my junior year or junior summer going into my senior year, and broke my foot. Was put in a cast. Came back, taken out of the cast right before preseason. The doctor said, you know, you're free to go. I had an orthopedic at the school look at it. He said, no, you shouldn't have been out of the cast yet. I missed preseason, started playing. I had played 1 game too many when I broke it again to redshirt. So they said, you know, you can't, you know, you played 1 too many games to redshirt. You're going to have surgery on your foot, but you can't hurt it anymore. So we can have surgery now, or you can wait to the end of the season. So I played the rest of my senior season on a broken foot, and then got surgery, you know, after the season. So they put a pin in. Now they leave it in. At that time, they took it out. So they took it out in February. Got put it in at Thanksgiving. Taken out in February. Started playing with the Richmond Kickers in the USL Pro Division, and like early July, I had just kind of earned a starting position. Was playing really well, feeling really right back into things, and hurt my knee. Had an MRI. Doctors looked at it, said it's just some cartilage damage. You'll be fine. It'll actually repair itself. Just rehab for a couple weeks. Rehab for a couple weeks. Gave out on me. Went back to the doctor. He said, wait 4 weeks. Waited 4 weeks. Was playing in a camp. I was going back to Old Dominion where I'd finished. I was going to be a GA there, and it gave out on me again. So the doctor who worked on my knee, he said, it's just cartilage. We're going to go in and trim it. So I went into surgery to have it trimmed, and woke up thinking I'd be back in 2 weeks. And the nurse said, your ACL was completely torn, but we weren't prepared to do the surgery. No, nobody, the MRI didn't catch it. The doctor, neither two different doctors didn't catch it. So I had to go back 2 weeks later and have the ACL repaired. So within, from Thanksgiving to October, I'd had 4 surgeries, you know, and of course I had had aspirations of we had the USL going on. MLS was not, you know, it was a rumor when I finished college, and then you know, so I was like, well, I'm going to go to Europe, and so I'd gotten a few contacts, I'd made a few things, but you know, then obviously with the surgeries, it wasn't going to happen. So I say, and unfortunately, I was able to come back and play for a few more years in the U.S. and different teams, but I use that story as an example because, as we all know, and it's even more pervasive nowadays, there's so many kids that are getting injured, so many girls that are tearing their ACLs, and I know it's a pandemic almost in certain regards. But I obviously, like so many people who go through an injury or a tough time, I was saying, "Why God? Why me? Why now? I have all these plans, you know, I have big things that I wanna do, and why is this happening?" And it took me a while before I got into coaching to understand when I started to have players go through those injuries, I'm like, okay, now it makes sense. The things that I felt, the things that I went through, I have a different level of empathy for my players now, and I can come along beside them. I know what it's like to have the surgery. I know what it's like to go through the rehab. I know what it's like to come back and think you're going to be great and you're not, and to go through those frustrations and the patience it takes to get back to where you were. And so God taught me a lot of lessons through those difficult times that now, I mean, I can't solve things for them, of course, but I can come along beside them in different ways than I would not have been able to had I not gone through all of that.
Yeah, you know, we talk about common themes, right? I think that's another one is that empathy that we're able to have. I mean, we were talking earlier about the faith side, right? I mean, Jesus came down to be able to suffer so we can know that he went through some of the trials, temptations that we did. And so when our players know that we actually do get it, it's not just like, "Oh yeah, I understand that," but you actually have gone through that, right? And that to be able to come into that, it's not the first time we've heard that, and I think that's something that these defining moments are always it's like there's a lot of common threads with the defining moments as well, and it so often is an injury, not a goal winning or game winning goal that someone's hitting in the upper V. Now it's like, no, it's gonna be a man. This is where I really started seeing what's really important. What are the things that I now that's the way it was for my wife. That's actually when she came to really know the Lord is when she had her fourth knee surgery and was out, again, just like what really matters. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Not awesome that that happened to you, but at the other side of it, right? What you're able to learn and what,
Romans eight
what
twenty
God
eight,
did
right?
teach you. Yeah. Yeah.
He'll work all
Exactly.
things for the good.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Alrighty. So we've talked about a few different coaches here throughout this conversation, but who would you say is, the best coach, or if you can't just say one, then maybe a couple that you played or coached with, and kind of what set him or her apart from the rest?
Well, I'm sure that if we'd ever played Baylor, Paul would have been the first in line for that.
Well, yeah. I
Thanks,
mean, that's
Lang.
a
I
given.
appreciate that.
That's a
I
given.
did
Appreciate
I
that.
did play against your wife though, and she was pretty good coach. So when she was at Northern Illinois, we played when she was there. So
Lang,
uh,
I was on the sideline.
He
I was
was
the
okay.
assistant, so I
Okay.
was there.
Okay. There you go. There
I
you
just
go.
hid behind her shadow for many
Yeah.
years. Still
Uh,
tried to.
that's not a bad place to be sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, Phil, that is such a loaded question. There have been so many, as I alluded to. Obviously, I talked extensively about Tony DeCicco. I would say the person that I would give the most credit for me going into coaching women would be Anson Durrance at Carolina. My sister, who's 2 years younger, played at UNC Greensboro, and she started working the North Carolina camps, which are obviously very famous, when she was in college, and then she said she got me into them and started working the camps, and I would, like a good learner, Anson used to do these all-star sessions in the morning before he would take the best campers. Of course, it was his recruiting tool. He would take the best campers and do a special session just with them before the rest of the camp would come out for the day. And I would get up every morning and I would just kind of sit on his hip. I was taking notes and listening and just trying to take it all in and see how we worked with the players and the coaching. And certainly I learned a ton about X's and O's, but I learned a lot about competitiveness and, of course, that competitive cauldron and how to challenge women, but also how to build relationships with them to the point that you can challenge them. And so I would say I would credit him a lot with, because at that time I was kind of like, I'll do whatever. I'll coach guys, I'll coach girls. It doesn't really matter to me. And I was most likely going to go, I was, a graduate assistant with Old Dominion with the men's team. And I just figured I would continue down that track. And it really opened up a whole new perspective of what it means to coach females. And, we get that question. I'm sure you've gotten it a ton, Paul and Phil. I know you've worked with your daughter and some of those, and they get that question all the time, like, why do you coach women? And my go-to answer is that I love the depth of the relationship that you can build on a more consistent basis. Not that you can't do with guys, but it's different. And but there's something special about having that relationship with your players, and then being, and again, not just seeing them succeed on the field, but being invited to weddings, getting text messages with the new baby they just had, or them coming in and saying and just sharing, things that are going on in their life. The depth of those relationships is tremendous. I know I kind of went on a tangent there. Sorry, but yeah, Anson was a huge one. I owe a lot to so when I was at Virginia Tech, Jerry Shanae was the coach there. He was also the wrestling coach and the golf coach at the time at Virginia Tech. And I did not, honestly, I will tell you, looking back on it, I did not respect him as a soccer coach. What I did not realize that I was learning until much later was the type of man he was. And he was a great man. He is a great man. And I learned a lot about just being a father figure, so to speak, to your players, from him. I transferred to Old Dominion University where I had Ralph Perez as a coach, and he's down in the LA area now. And he's been an assistant with the Men's World Cup team, with the Olympic team, with MLS teams. an incredibly knowledgeable coach. He opened my mind to areas of the game I had no clue about. And so from an X's and O's standpoint, he was incredibly influential. And so again, there are a number of people, Jeff Tipping at the NSCA, Paul Marco, Paul Payne, Nancy Feldman, Peter Gooding, so many of these people, George Perry, so many of these people just took the time out of their way to mentor me and guide me and help me. And there's just so many good coaches. You guys mentioned Randy Waldrum. Again, similar to Tony DeChico. I was working a course with him at Butler University many years ago when he was at Notre Dame. And I just said, hey, I can ask you a couple questions. I figured I'd get, 15, 20 minutes. He spent 2 hours with me
Mm.
and just spent the time talking to me and talking about how he was playing at Notre Dame. And yeah, I'd never played a 4-3-3. And after that conversation, I've never played a different formation, so I mean, the influence of some of those coaches has been just tremendous.
Yeah, and that you basically took the question where I said one and you turned it into an Academy Award speech. I'm not gonna lie there, but I get it. It's so hard. It is a hard question, and it's really an impossible question because so many people impact us in so many different ways. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, there's one person," but that's rare. But then the other thing is tangents are a good thing for it. We like tangents. Tangents get to the good stuff oftentimes, not always, but a lot of the times we get to, and this is no exception to that. That was some good, really super encouraging just to hear. Also, we do the other one of the other things we talk about on the show a lot, and I think that what you just talked about proves that is, you know, ask the next question and seek out people who you respect and, see if you can have some time with them. Most people will take that time if they know they can help you.
Mhm.
And so I think oftentimes we're like, "Oh, no, I don't wanna bother them. They wouldn't have the time. They wouldn't do this." And sometimes they won't, but most people will be like, "Hey, you know what? Now's not the right time, but hey, give me a call, give me a text," whatever the case may be. And so I would definitely take that as another example of, we've talked about take the meeting, but on the flip side of that is make the call, send the text, go up and talk to somebody if you see him at a convention, or if you see him at a camp, or if you see him somewhere else, and just, see if they can take a few minutes to give you some of that wisdom that they've learned over the years. So anyway,
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that the reality of that is that most are willing to do it because it's been done to them, right? So
yep,
you got to keep
yep,
keep keep paying for the person behind you, basically in the drive-through line, right? So that just continues to go. Like you've obviously we've all been in the game for a long time, but I mean, I even you talk about ODP and how important it was, back even when we were kids, and that was kind of the way to go, and how regional soccer was back in the day, and how that's changed. Take us through, if you can, maybe some of the things you've seen through the sport and U.S. soccer, things that you really like about kind of where we are now with the sport. Maybe some things you think that we need to challenge the system on a little bit.
Oh, another question that probably takes 3 or 4, maybe more,
Episode
podcasts
four,
and
I got it.
questions.
Episode four, we got it.
Gosh, okay. I might have to send Phil a whole tracksuit to get on here a few more times, so, we'll see. Yeah, that's a big question. That's a big question, and I think that, the state of soccer in the US in certain respects is awesome. And in certain respects, obviously, is always needs to be tweaked, and every person has an opinion on that. I think that we are always. I think on the way again, and you have to talk about you have to differentiate youth soccer from professional soccer to women's soccer, college soccer, men's soccer. They all have different components about what's right and what's wrong for them. But I think that one of the things that I was really impressed with, and a long time ago, or in the early 2000s, I think, I had a chance to go over to Holland, and for about a week, I got to tour with the KMVB, their Dutch federation, and it was, gosh, was treated like royalty. I don't know why, but I was. And so we went to youth trainings. We were staying at the National Training Center. We got to see pro games, and it was just kind of really an in-depth look behind the scenes at everything they were doing in their soccer organization. And obviously, the Dutch are very proud because it's a tiny country that's been exceptionally successful on the national level, and now on the women's side as well. And so But the thing, and again, we all say it may not be possible in the United States because of how big we are, but everything was under one organization. And I know that's completely counter to the American diversification model, but I thought it was so important because referees, youth soccer, professional soccer, it was so well coordinated and it was so integrated. And because of that, I think it allowed for a different level of development through their youth systems that is paying off on their pro levels. And so again, you look at our model, we've got the GA, we've got ECNL, we've got MLS Next, we've got 4 different pro leagues kind of all scrapping to survive. We've got all that we've got US club soccer and we've got US youth soccer. We've got the Soccer Coaches Education Department. We've got US Soccer Education Department. And some of that diversification is great because it just gives you different perspectives and personalities to work with and the different philosophies and ways of learning. But it's so convoluted and it's so mixed that it's really hard. And I think it's hard to say. And again, I don't think there is a right way to play. A lot of countries, Brazil has a particular style, right? England's going to have a somewhat of a particular style, although that's changed a lot over the years with how the EPL is. Holland has a particular style and way to play. I mean, with the US and how diversified we are, we probably don't have that, but there's still probably some things that we could do to funnel in and say, here are the real basics that we need to develop. And we've done that at times, but it seems to always shift. We have a director of coaching for United Soccer, for US Soccer, but that changes like every 2 years. And one year it's an American, then it's a Dutch, then it's a German, then it's an American again. Now, then you have Claudio Reyna pulling in all this stuff he got from Man City. I mean, it's all over the place. And so I think that's one of the things that's probably limiting us to a degree. And then obviously, one of the most um, obvious things that I'm sure you guys have talked about at some point on the podcast is pay to play system that keeps out some of that prevents. I mean, my son. I mean, let's just give you an example, okay? My younger son, he's 13 right now, and about a year and a half ago, we in Lynchburg here, the club he was playing for wasn't, it's okay, but it's not very high level. So we wanted to expose him to something different. We put him in the ODP system. So first he has the district. So he has to trial for district. There's a cost there. Then he makes the district team. Now there's a cost for the training. Now there's costs for the shirts and everything that he's got to play on. And so we've got to drive him an hour and 15 minutes to get to these sessions already one way. So then he makes the state pool. So there's another cost there. Then he gets invited to a couple events, another cost, right? And we're not talking about $50. We're talking about like $400 to play 2 games in a weekend. And so then all of a sudden he makes the regional pool. So all of a sudden now there's another $1,000 and plus the travel expenses. Then he gets invited to the regional camp in Florida. And now, I mean, it was so cost prohibitive for him to be able to go through that system. And I will, and this is a direct quote. When I saw the cost of going to the regional camp in Florida, I called the administrator and said, "Why in the world is this so expensive? You're we this covers his housing, it covers lunch, but not breakfast or dinner. It doesn't cover any of his we have to pay for the uniform and it covered nothing." And it was like, anyway, it was a lot. And he said, "Well, we lost money last year, so we have to recoup it this year. We had to raise the cost."
Yeah.
Like, how can you lose money? Like in this, like, are you kidding me? So that for me said, we're never doing that again. It wasn't about the kids. It was about business model. And so those types of things, I think, and fortunately we were able to afford that to give them that opportunity, but there are thousands and thousands of families who can't. So so again, you got me on a little bit of a soapbox there for that, but I think that there are certain aspects of the American system that are working very well. Certainly, we have more games on television. We have more access to watching professional soccer in person. I mean, today is a plethora of games on television, right? You've got Sweden, France, and Euro qualifying. You've got USA, Japan, and the women's She Believes Cup. You've got the two Champions League games on. I mean, there's MLS on. I mean, you have more soccer now than I think people can know what to do with, and that's creating something that's fantastic for our kids to be able to watch high level soccer. So that's fantastic. The last caveat I'll say with that, though, to before I step off my soapbox here, I think on the guy side, and again, forgive me for being stereotypical here a little bit, but on the guy side, they are embracing the ability to see their heroes on a day-to-day basis on the television or in person. I know my son, like, we'll watch Liverpool, he knows every player, and he'll say, "Wait a second, Joe Gomez is in different position today, Dad." I mean, like, he knows, he sees, he recognizes it. Unfortunately, on the female side, I don't think we have that as much. I think they're fans, but they're not students, and that's probably one of the things that our women's soccer, I'm not sure how to correct that, but they just haven't, and again, of course, there are always exceptions, but as a group of youth soccer, like, they'll go and scream for Alex Morgan on the sideline, but I don't think that they're watching how she plays and going and emulating it. I don't think they're watching Kevin De Bruyne and saying, "I wanna be a midfielder like him." And the guys are doing that, but I don't think the girls are. I can go to my team right now, a Division I college team, they played soccer their whole life, and I would guarantee that maybe 1 or 2 players could name 3 players on the women's national team, right? They probably named Megan Rapinoe because she's no longer there, right? I mean, they named Alex Morgan, and then they would probably struggle after that. Maybe Mallory Pugh. I mean, they would get a couple of them, but most of them have no clue about any of those things. They love the game, but they're a fan of the game, but they're not a student of the game.
It's funny you say that, Lane, because when we would run camps, summer camps, we would do that in front of our campers. We would ask them, "Okay, who can name, current national team players?" And we just did girls camp. We didn't do any boys. And it was that, it was, they knew that the top 2 or 3 that were you know, the ones that US Soccer wanted to publicize the most, but they weren't watching the games.
Mm.
So it's an interesting point you bring up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a little case study in my house, and I see, my sons, and they're watching, they're studying, they're like my son will just watch. He's a striker, and he'll just watch the best goals. We're a Man United family, so he'll just watch literally the best Rooney goals, best Beckham goals, best Rashford goals, seeing how they're scoring. And you watch him in a game, and he just does stuff like that because he's been watching it over and over and over. Now, I'm not saying he's doing the things they're doing, but he's trying things and he's doing things because he's seeing it. My son's watching he's a central midfielder. He's watching the Barcelona, 2010, 2011, 2012 teams just moving it, like, incredibly and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing, and he's watching, for what can I do? What does it look like? So, that's something that's so important. I think the other thing that, you talked about there is the fact that US is a melting pot is a good thing in so many ways, but not when you're saying, like, what is the style? What do we do? How do we play? What does it look like? What is our identity? Right? And you see that I think you're seeing that with Manchester United. Speaking of, they've had so many different managers over the last several. There's no identity. You watch game to game. There's nothing that they're playing with any purpose of anything that they're building to. Apparently, Ten Hag has something, but I haven't seen it yet. And so that's something that you see, I think, in a lot of what we have. And I'm not saying that you don't use, play to the personnel you have. Of course, you do that at some level. But what is the consistency? Because without that consistency, in culture, but also in the way you play, it's going to be really hard to build a program. And so I think that goes to every level because we're taking our cue from the top and we're
Right.
seeing that at every level. And then with the pay to play, throw that on top of it, along with some other things. It's tough. It's really tough. And because we're such a big country, what are you going to do? I think what's the solution? Right? That's where it gets to be even tougher because we're going, well, we could throw stuff into the ring, but then are we willing to take 5, 10 years to try it
Mm.
with the idea that it might not work, right? So that's the rub. So It is. It's a lot, but yeah. So I agree with you. We could talk for hours and hours, and we all have our soapboxes with it. But I think if there's a lot in there to chew on. So folks, go back and listen to that for sure. If you kind of miss some of that. All right. Well, we have our last couple questions that we do ask all of our guests. A lot of these are turning into a lot of questions we ask most of our guests anyway. But these are two questions we do ask everybody. And the first is, how have you used the lessons you've learned directly from the game in your marriage and your parenting?
Well, I have a whistle that when I'm ready to eat dinner, no, I'm just, so
I like it. I like it. It's a good
I put
idea.
cones out.
Yeah.
Um, so they
Ice
know
cream
when it
cones. Ice
goes.
cream cones, right?
Ice cream cones, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that the first thing that I'll say, and so we talked about this a while back when we started talking about the iron chat of like work-life balance. Yeah, they were there. I had these early aspirations of, when I first started coaching, I'll be at South Dakota State for 4 or 5 years, and I'll be at this school and then that school, and I'm going to win a national championship, and I'm going to be in the U.S. soccer staff, and I do this and do that, and those are great goals, and there's nothing wrong with them. But then I had my first child, and everything changed in that moment, right? And so one of the things that I try to prioritize is making sure that my family, and again, we all go through seasons, right? Preseason, you're going to have to devote a lot of time to those players, but there are other times in the season where you can devote a little bit more time to your family. But one of the things. I have 4 kids, and I've coached them all in soccer at some point in their careers, and still fortunately being able to coach my youngest, with his club team. And so it's so when the thing that I try to take both ways is, how can I treat my players like my daughters, and how do I treat my children in such a way that I treat my players? And I say that it goes both ways because with my players, there's always the balance of, how do I challenge you in the appropriate way to want more, to do more, to be better? And I take that lesson into the family with me. How do I do that with my kids? We read books all the time with my team, and a lot of times I'll take an extra one and give it to my daughter and say, "Okay, read this. This is the team's reading this right now. I'd like you to read it as well." And then the reverse side, how do I, if if that were my daughter, how would I approach her after the game? What would I say? How would I do it in such a way that a father would do it? And I know sometimes I heard this great thing. Sometimes, you go to and I will, sometimes I'll go to my kids after a game that I've either coached them or after I've just watched them play. And I'll say, okay, do you want dad or do you want coach? Right? Do you want the person just come alongside you and put your arm around you and say, great job, let's go get some ice cream? Or do you want me to break things down for you? And that has culminated in my daughter, my older daughter, who's a senior in high school right now. She's going to come play for me here at Liberty. And so that relationship, has been built on navigating the dad coach hats that I wear. And again, we've had a lot of conversations what that might look like, playing for me as a college player. But, she's kind of ready for it, and she's ready to understand that the dynamics of our relationship will be a little different than when I coached her as a club player. So those are a few of the things that I've kind of taken away.
Yeah, I like that. I actually just had a conversation with my daughter about, that dynamic, that tension, right? And she goes, "Yeah, when dad used to tell me when I had a bad game, he said, you stunk today."
Mhm.
And she goes, "But I like that because then I knew when I didn't, he actually meant it."
Right.
Right? Like, so it was it is a tension though, and different kids, every kid is different. We have 5 kids, and I don't do that with every kid,
Mhm.
right? And so depending on what they're asking for, and maybe even depending on the day too,
Mhm.
and depending on how the game went and so on and so forth. So, yeah. Paul, what do you think, man?
Yeah, and you're doing that with your team, right? Every personality is different. You got to manage every one of your players differently, and it's not any different inside the home, right? I've got 4 kids, and each one of their personalities is totally different. So when they're playing or done playing, I handle them all differently, just as I would, after a match when I coached at Baylor. Some kids, you just leave them alone for a few minutes. Some you need to talk to right away. Some you need to put your arm around them. Some you need to just, give them some space. So those things definitely overlap in and out of the house and on and off the field. But I like that idea of, hey, do you want dad right now, or do you want coach? And there's phases of my children already that I'm not sure sometimes they even think Marcy and I know anything about soccer. So it's best that we just don't say anything in the moment. Like, yeah, well, my coach told me this. I'm like, oh, okay. The volunteer dad who basically knows baseball, and that's great, but you back away and they're having fun. So, um, but no, I love that. I love that insight. On to our last official question here, Lang. What have you watched, read, or listened to that's most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
Boy. Well, I am really have become an avid reader. I mean, I just engulf books, and probably within the last year or so, I've really started to. I told you I wasn't very technologically savvy, but I've really started to get into podcasts, and most of them are leadership oriented. Craig Rochelle is a really good one. If you haven't heard of him,
Hmm.
he does a lot of
Yep.
leadership stuff, which is very good. John Gordon, Ed Milet. Those are probably the top three that I probably listen to on a regular basis that are very good. And the nice thing about all three of them is that they're faith based. Where John Gordon is a little bit more. He's moving in that direction more and more with his podcasts and his books and those types of things. And so it's great because ultimately, as you know, and I'm speaking to the choir here with you guys, that so much of our coaching is wrapped in or around our identity. And if that gets out of whack, right, the transformational versus transactional, result oriented, those types of things, which are all part of our world. But if it gets out of whack, then things are not right. We're not settled. Family life's not good. Relationships aren't good. Culture suffers, and eventually on the field suffers too. So So I've really appreciated a lot of those because they talk about aspects of identity. They talk about aspects of leading from a faith based perspective, a faith based rock, so to speak, that like this is where it all comes from. If you don't have this support system in place, nothing else really matters because it's going to fall. So that's been a really good one. We have, as I said, I make my players read at least two books a year. We read one in preseason and one in the spring. The last two books we've read, the one this spring was called "Win the Day" by Mark Batterson. And that's a great one. Again, a Christian based one about developing daily habits. And then the one we read before that was The Christian Athlete by Brian Smith. And that was a really good one too. And then outside of faith based books, the best one of the best ones that I come back to all the time is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And so that comes back to that idea of perseverance through difficult times. So those would be a few of the ones that I would recommend, especially out of the most recent reading and list.
Those are
Yeah,
some great,
those are
great books.
some good ones. I'm glad you made it through the list at the back of Anson Dorn's as well. Probably within the last couple of years, I'm sure. Once you got through all of that.
Yeah. It was extensive, but, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, I actually have the, Christian Athlete on my, nightstand right now. It is, I'm
Yes.
just working through that, gonna go through that with my kids as well. I
Yeah.
think, Paul, you'd
It's
mentioned
a good
that
one.
was what you went through with your kids recently, right?
Yep,
Or
we're actually
yeah,
going through it,
yeah.
and there's so much overlap in the things that we try to do through Warrior Way in that book. It's probably one of the first books I think that really dives headfirst into some of the things I think we see with our current Christian athletes and
Mhm.
what is being viewed as or what we want to come across as, and really just get into the heart of like, what does it really mean to carry God with you through everything and be everything for Him, and that the glory that He gets from that is from the actions that show His love through the gifts that He's given you. So that's a great book.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think Brian takes a lot of what Athletes in Action has done over the years and kinda condenses it into a book, and so good, so good. All right. Well, thank you, Lang. Man, the time always goes so fast in these interviews, and I'm so grateful for you. Grateful for our friendship. Grateful for all that you're doing at Liberty and with your family, and just being such a great model of just coaches who are really seeking to be those transformational coaches. So thank you, and like I said, thanks for being our guest today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks to you guys. I appreciate you having me on and honored. And yeah, I always enjoy listening to a lot of these things. And obviously, the other things that we've been working with the faith based coaches has been great. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we will have the show notes with everything that we've talked about today. We'll have them there. We'll have links to Iron Chats. We'll have links to the books and the different things, the podcasts that have been mentioned. Also, we'll have the link to Warrior Way, which Paul just mentioned there. And if you want to learn more about that, you can find that at the show notes. Learn more about Providence World, which has, coaching the bigger game, disc stuff as well. All that's in the show notes. You know where to find it. So, as always, folks, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show and you are using it to be a better coach, to be a better parent, to be a better spouse, to be a better player, to be a better leader, and be better in all that you do. And to continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.